Our next presenters are my colleagues from here at Mendoza. Jessica McManus Holt teaches our undergraduate core course in business ethics and has been largely involved with figuring out what the curriculum for ethics should be at the undergraduate level. And she will be followed by Joe Holt, who you haven't met yet. Joe is in the back there. Joe teaches a couple of sections of our core course in the MBA program and had a lot to do with reframing and redesigning that course a couple of years ago. So without further ado, and as soon as Jessica's got her technology up, we'll get started.
Good stuff, thanks. Okay, thank you. So again, I'll be quick. I just wanted to give a little bit of information about kind of the front end of these conversations. So, you know, you're working with these folks a few years out. This is kind of what we do with them when we have them here, really starting at the sophomore year. So this is their real first introduction to thinking about ethics within the context of the professions. So this is just kind of for informational purposes. We have what we call the Introduction to Business Ethics course. It sees about 700 now students each year. All of our sophomore business major students go through this course. And I have the privilege of working with the majority of those. I see about 600 students a year. And this sophomore level course is based on the foundational concepts of ethics. So the theoretical pieces, kind of the knowing of the what, right? Where we talked also about the why and the how a little bit earlier. So we do this required course, and I'll talk to you just for a moment about some of the assessment measures we're building into the course. But did want to note also that there are, you know, a suite of options that these students can then take to delve deeper into some of the more applied areas of ethics. And the two that I'll talk a little bit about in a minute are our Giving Voice to Values dedicated elective, and then a new one that we just launched this term called Managing and Millennials. That said, colleagues throughout the business curriculum in the more traditional business disciplines of accountancy and finance, ethics is woven into these topics consistently, and cases are brought in, and we really do have a kind of a holistic approach to teaching ethics in the undergrad program. And this just bears quick mention, I think, merits quick mention. This frame, this ask more of business, this is the positioning statement that you might have seen associated with our business school. And it's got the same kind of 3 levels of attention that we focus on in the classroom. So we talk about individual decision making and integrity, how that in turn affects organizational ethics and culture, and then societal issues, so the macro conversations. And we begin to introduce kind of all 3 of these levels in the classroom. The goal of our required core course is, again, 3-part in there, much more eloquently and with flourish. The objectives are worded for the students. But in essence, we're saying raising awareness, improving knowledge, and improving judgment. So again, moving that transition between the knowing and the doing, or prompting consideration of acting on these foundational concepts. Okay, and you know, we like to use that term, moral courage, cultivating moral courage. And as Mary and others have pointed out, we know the data tells us that the act of practicing moral courage enhances our capacity to flex that muscle. So that's our kind of philosophy behind the course. So assessment. We've been doing a couple of things. One that we just wrapped up that we're quite excited about was a 3-year longitudinal study of outcomes associated with the required course. So students took 2 instruments pre and post this course, and one was a case study analysis. So there was a vignette about credit card marketing to students, and they read the case and replied to a series of questions, basically walking them through a traditional kind of ethics decision model, right? And the second part was a more kind of a comprehensive set of open-ended items around conceptions of business and society, and why did you come to Notre Dame? Why do you want to study business? We have all sorts of rich data here that has yet to be coded. We're working on that piece right now. But we have the case study data, and what we've seen consistently over the 3 years of the assessment is that the students are showing growth across these 4 measures we've developed based on what's called the 4-component model of moral reasoning. Darsha Narvaez and others' work. Students are showing growth across these measures, which in part is interesting because, as others have noted, this doesn't always happen with business students, right? Sometimes you see a negative correlation between training and these sorts of measures. We saw the most growth in their articulation of the concepts, which is to be expected because that's the goal of the course, right, to introduce these concepts. Where our room for growth was, although again saw statistically significant growth, we saw some room for opportunity around the application piece. And it's that kind of finding that prompts the type of electives and other conversations that we have. One of the other things we do around assessment within the required course is a new tool for us. It's a product ethics game, and this is not a product of Mendoza. This is an external product. And the students take 2 projects on through this activity. The first, and my students just finished it this week, so we're working on this right now. They all do a self-assessment, and this is all online. Basically helping them to articulate their own preferred ethical lens. And the lenses are based on the theoretical foundations of ethics. And so it's about identifying where we're most comfortable and fluent, and then thinking about ways to be most effective, working with people that come from all 4 of the lenses. So again, trying to get a real applied focus. There are also opportunities for them to walk through dilemmas online. And it was interesting to note the conversation about the video games and the jazzing it up for the students, because I have the opposite problem. My students don't think that ethics game is fancy enough. And they say, where are the video clips? And where's the flashing lights? And while it's quite a nice product, it could use a little spiffing up, I think, and the students feel that way too. So it's interesting to see our targets, how that changes. So they do the simulations, and what we're finding is that the data that's generated from their work, because it's wonderfully kept for us on this online interface, we have all sorts of rich sources of analysis, right? So for example, one of the assignments the students participate in after their own self-assessment is to go through a case simulation, right? And one of their final tasks is to develop a memo articulating what they've decided to do and why. Of course, again, with that practical intent that part of becoming an effective decision maker is being able to articulate your decisions to others, right? And so we have these memos for 2 dilemmas per student. So we just have all sorts of interesting information. And we're just beginning to think about ways to tie assessment goals. Perhaps, how does the sophistication of their analysis change over time in Mendoza, for example? So those are some things we're starting to work about. So just a couple notes on the 2 electives I wanted to highlight. We heard all about the wonderful program that is giving voice to values. And we were so fortunate several years back, Carolyn Wu invited Mary to join us at Notre Dame and share some of this information, and Mary has just been invaluable for us in designing a dedicated course for undergraduates to these concepts. So again, that recognizing that transition from the knowing to the doing, right, the action orientation. So this is an elective that's offered each fall, and we also are sharing some of the tenets of giving voice to values in other places in the business school. For example, using it at MBA orientation as a foundational exercise. So it's just been a really interesting piece for us. One of the neat things that's come out of our experience with giving voice to values, my students' final assignment for the course is to write their own case. And these are cases of course, being 20-year-old, senior level students, they don't have a lot of business experience at this point, although some have some internships under their belt. So they'll write dilemmas based on student life conflicts, plagiarism, substance abuse, what to do if a team member is, engaged in an activity that's counter to the policies of the team. All sorts of really interesting cases have been generated, in addition to some internship cases, such as the pressure to overbill hours and such. And Mary has been working with the students and me to actually write up those cases and include them in the GVV collection. So we're really excited about that. The last part, this new course, Managing in Millennials, this is, again, just offered for the first time now this spring. And I was thrilled that we kind of threw it out to the students and it filled up. We have a nice group of 30 students who are all seniors. And I had them raise their hands the other day and tell us who was already, knew where they were going next year. And quite a lot of them do, which I thought was interesting. So it's not only about maybe kind of enhancing your employability, but being more effective at where you end up going. And so our focus here is an attempt to be quite practical, think about the ethics within some of these multi-generational issues that we've been talking about. Effective use of technology, the way we brand ourselves to our others, to our colleagues and to others, aligning work with values. We're doing some self-assessments and things in the classroom. So we're really excited about this. And this also will then present some opportunities for assessment. This course and GVV, one of the things that we're working on is staying in touch with alumni after they leave us at Notre Dame and go out into the world so that they can tell us what they're doing with this information, right? How are they using it? Has it been effective? And so that really gets at some of the impact of the learning. So we're done. I'm going to turn it over to Joe, my colleague, who is our Director for Executive Ethics. But I hope, obviously, excited about all of this stuff and would love to continue the conversations offline with any of you. So thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. Good morning. Hi, how you doing? Welcome. Great to see you back. Colleagues, great to see you. Guests, a warm welcome to South Bend. We're going to kind of compress things a little bit. Ed had mentioned that we revised our required ethics course in the MBA and also the EMBA curricula. I was asked to play a role in that, so I've been asked to kind of speak about, by Adam and Ed, about the process of doing that, and then somewhat about the outcome of doing it. In terms of process, rather than simply describe it, we thought it might be helpful to actually sort of experience it with you folks. Because part of that involves speaking with colleagues here, and I spoke to ethics faculty at other schools. I went to Darden and Harvard and Duke and a number of other schools to find out kind of what do you think is best about your program, and if you could change any one thing, what would it be? But part of it was talking with current students and also folks I know are just out in the business world practicing and everything, and that I found was probably the most insightful part of it. But what I wanted to do was ask a question. How many folks, either at the undergraduate or graduate level, have had a course in business ethics at some point? Okay. So fair number. How many folks have had ethics training in a corporate setting, organizational? So pretty much everybody. Do I need two?
I don't know. Does he need two?
I don't think so. Really not that interesting. That would be too much of a not so good thing. So I always said one of the things I want on my tomb when I pass away is he meant well. So anyway, one of the things I don't want is ate well and had a nice time. But anyway, so the question I had for folks who are in the business world practicing and have had a business ethics course is, given the concrete ethics challenges you in fact have experienced since graduation, what could have been included in that ethics course that wasn't included that would have been helpful to you? So, given the concrete ethics challenges you in fact have experienced, what could the ethics course have included that it didn't include that would have been helpful to you? I want to start with that question. I have a separate question for the ethics training in the organizational context. So folks have had a business ethics course. Can you think of anything that wasn't included in that course that could have been included that would have been helpful to you? Craig, please.
I think so much of it is contextual
Okay.
in terms of what really matters. But it strikes me that what could be is to prepare people, to the extent possible, for the natural human emotional journey when faced with these things. So the amygdala will kick in, how you'll feel, how time will change, all those kinds of things that are pretty predictable. If there's any ways to simulate that, I don't know who's here smarter than I am, so that people can feel that, I think that may, because this is so cognitive. It's so cognitive.
Kind of life above the shoulders.
And when you get hit with your first one, it's anything but cognitive.
So you work with some people who are not purely rational.
One or two. None of them.
Okay, tremendous. That side of it. Okay, fantastic.
I was going to say the same thing. I think that people get into awkward situations and they're working on emotion and they don't know what to do with.
I actually, supportive of that, one of the folks I spoke to was somebody I taught in an MBA program I spent some time practicing corporate law, and I taught in Loyola's MBA program in the evening. And one of the fellows I had as a student there, who's a VP of compliance for TransUnion, said, he said, really, it's when you encounter a dilemma and you know something ought to be addressed, but you don't really know how to address it, and it makes you uncomfortable. The kind of, difficult conversations was his sort of thing. And Mary's done tremendous work on that very sort of thing. But and a lot of that is what makes it difficult is emotion in a lot of cases. But,
I would say, people don't wake up in the morning to be unethical.
No.
But there are systems in place, performance management and others, that create the environment that allows ethical behavior to enter into the organization. And so it's easy sometimes to point at the ethics officers and go fix it. Sometimes you have to step back and understand what are the forces at play. Craig's perspective, around the commissioning systems, that's going to drive a certain set of behavior there. And you need to understand what's really kind of pushing people in this direction. Doesn't mean to change it. It's much more holistic. It's not an isolation.
Yeah, one of the best things I've ever read on that was an interview some years ago with a CEO talking about his workforce. And he said, about 15% of our people are kind of like moral saints. They're the kind of people that are going to do the right thing even if somebody's looking. I never worry about them. He said about 10-15% I have to watch like a hawk, otherwise they'll get themselves and us in a lot of trouble. He said the remaining approximately 70% are fundamentally good people who mean to do the right thing, but they're not immune to temptation or lapse. And he said, my primary responsibility is creating a context that supports the better judgment of the 70%. Top 15 you don't have to worry about. Bottom 15 are going to be a problem no matter what you do. We're about those folks in the middle who kind of, good people could go either way, but support stats. The importance of, character matters, but one of the things we do in the class is watch Stanley Milgram's obedience experiment, something they do also at Darden. And one of his conclusions is that context generally trumps character in terms of shaping behavior. So that's realism. It's good to be alive. It's not just rational individuals making isolated moral judgments about what's right. That's part of it. But Bill, go ahead.
One of the things that, going back to the ethics course, it's evolved a lot since then. So anything I would add is already in play. But working with a lot of, not to make this just a millennial issue, but I think because we're talking about training the next generation.
Sure.
Working with a lot.
We got it all together.
And in the course of raising 3 millennials, is this, as you go through life, I guess it's the advantage of looking back now, is helping them define what success really is. And I think part of the thing is when you're coming through school and you jump into the work environment, success will always be put in your face is you're here and somebody else is here. Or you make this, somebody else makes this. Or somebody had this idea. It's always going to be competition. And what you realize in the short term, what's going to always trump, and you talk about that fat middle part of the bell curve, right, that you're really trying to influence. The influences of their life, I think, every single day are going to be the here and now, how I define success, because how the world defines whether or not I'm successful.
Right.
Over the course of a lifetime, it's going to be the things that really matter. And I saw that as she jumped right through it, Jessica, spirituality. Now, you're not going to find that in a lot of MBA courses, right, or undergrad. But here at Notre Dame, what that really means is, I think people can look at that and just write them off, okay, we threw it on there because it's Notre Dame, but I think when you get really underneath what spirituality means beyond the Catholic tradition, it's how do I long-term really define who I am and where I'm going? And where does career and everything else fit in? And I think that at the end of it all, like you said on your tombstone, it's not going to be how much money I make. It doesn't make a difference.
This afternoon, I'm teaching a spirituality work elective in the MBA program, so we do indeed do that. When I first started teaching for Notre Dame, it was part-time in the Chicago EMBA program. I was then full-time at University of Chicago at their law school. And one of the ethics classes is Notre Dame. I mentioned something about a Good Samaritan, and they said, it's an ethics class, you can't talk about the Bible. I said, it's Notre Dame. I said, coming to Notre Dame and complaining when somebody mentions God or the Bible is like going to the opera and complaining if they sing in Italian. It's just kind of, what do you expect? It's America, sing in English. So, yeah, we do that. But a lot of it is just, what are the values and beliefs that define you, and in what way can your business work be a manner of living out those values and beliefs in a fundamental way. Now, for most folks in our classrooms, and I would assume in your workplaces, most people are people of some kind of faith. So obviously they're thinking about success and what matters and so forth is going to be shaped by that, but there aren't very many contexts in which they can speak about it. In terms of success, by the way, I was thinking about that last week when Mitt Romney said, I'm not going to apologize for being successful. So, well, it's kind of a narrow definition of successful. But, most people would say, he is successful because he's got money. But I actually have been asked to give a talk in the Notre Dame MBA orientation program every year since I came on board in 2004 on how do you measure success in life. So that very question. Interestingly, by the way, to ponder, the Oxford American Dictionary definition is the attainment of wealth, fame, or position. Any one of the three will do. That's and that's not a moral document. It's just when people use this word in this culture, here's what they mean by it. What's interesting to me is that all of those are things that you have. You have wealth, you have fame, you have position. Say nothing about the kind of person you are. Say nothing about the quality of relationships you have, your legacy, anything like that. But yes, Gretchen.
To build on this a little bit, one of the things we do with our students is cast this idea in terms of reputation management, individual reputation management. Okay. So your reputation is the most important asset you will ever own or manage.
Okay.
And that management process begins today. Right. As a freshman in our Business 101 professional responsibility class, look around you, work with you, you're building your reputation, and it's a never-ending process.
Yeah.
To that end, I guess, I was a law student at the University of Chicago, and I took their professional responsibility class, and I must tell you, I probably found it lacking in some very significant ways. But one of the things that I think would have been really useful to your question would be to try to understand what the outcome is. You do a case study, you look at the case, and you are limited in time. What's interesting, I think, is to what would have happened to that person later, or what did happen to that individual who was involved in that situation. If it's possible to give people a sense beyond the individual facts of the situation or case, to the Lockheed Martin example, what happened to Robert? Did he ever find another job? Just watching the rest of his life?
So you have to play chess and not checkers. We get kind of caught up in the immediacy of the moment. By the way, when I was at University of Chicago, I did not teach a professional responsibility course. And they asked me, they said, you've taught business ethics for years, why don't you teach that? And I said, well, because it has nothing to do with ethics. It has to do with what are the rules and when are you following them, but is that good or bad or right or wrong or these kinds of questions. So they invited me to create a seminar that dealt with sort of the bigger questions, and that's what he did. To Mike's point, during that seminar, I had about 25 students. I asked them one day, I want you to jot down the 3 things that most quickly come to mind when you think about criteria for measuring success in life. So I wrote these things down, they handed them in. About 15 of the 25 students were married, about 10 or 12 of the students were parents. What was interesting is not a single married student included being a good spouse, not a single parent included being a good parent. Everything I said success in life, everything they sent in had to do with career success. And by the way, these people love their spouses and children. It's just when they think about measuring success, that's not what came to mind. What came to mind was the career part of it. So that reputation, not just in the workplace, but in life. Mike, please.
Joe, going back to your original question.
Good.
What would we put in the class? And I don't have a reference of a prior class because partially due to my age, there were no ethics classes. Or partially due to the university I went to, I don't know the answer to that. But I might suggest something very simple when you're dealing with these courses for young people. I think it's important to stress that, yes, you will come up up to some situation, whether it's your first day on the job, your first month of your first year, things will happen. And it's important that these young folks realize, and I realize you can't cover every scenario, it's impossible, but they have to realize also that they shouldn't necessarily make a decision in a vacuum and feel like all the weight's on their shoulders personally, because most institutions or organizations have some means to assist somebody with their dilemmas.
Okay.
It's whether they choose to use it.
Okay.
Even an entrepreneur, a young person who goes out and starts their own software company, I mean, there's probably somebody that he or she could go to talk to. Now, let me give you a data point. This is a delayed data point. It's very concerning. We do have annual ethics surveys and so forth, and we track the number of people who would say, yes, I will go to another source to assist with an ethical dilemma. And in this past year, which I'm going to publish in my annual report coming up, I noticed this relatively slight trend, but nevertheless a negative one. 10% of our people said they would not seek assistance in handling an ethical dilemma. That was
Not just that they
rise.
don't, but they would not.
They would not seek assistance.
Okay.
Didn't ask, do they know where to go with it? They just said they would not seek assistance, like they're going to handle it on their own. And the reason why I think this is pertinent to you all on the education field, with young people, we sliced that data and found that that answer was more prevalent among our youngest people coming in from institutions, educational institutions, or coming.
How would you explain that, Mike? I mean,
It's hard to explain.
Okay.
It really is hard to explain. That's why I'm bringing this point up as something practical.
Okay.
To be focused on, because it's a point of alarm for me personally to think of 56,000 people. I realize they're not all our youngest group, but 5,000 out of 56 may not consult on an ethical dilemma. Now that's a problem.
One of the things I try to highlight in the class that's supportive of what you're saying is that, when you discuss a case, I often have students say, when they hear a classmate's comments, oh, I hadn't thought about that. I said, that should highlight the benefit of batting these dilemmas ideas around with other good and intelligent people. We all have pieces of the puzzle. Nobody's got the whole thing. You can get insights that others don't have. So.
Actually, I thought was interesting. It's not just Deloitte, the National Business Ethics Survey done by the Ethics Research Center confirms the same data. It's across all industries.
Is there an explanation or given? No. Okay.
No, but they point out that it does not bode well for the future.
Okay.
They make that comment.
Yeah.
That's tremendously important. Thank you. Yes, Kevin.
I'd say, this may sound kind of heretical, but I think what really is the issue from my business of working with executives who have various behavioral issues, decision-making, judgment, is that there is this addiction to segmentation of the normal curve. In other words, we do believe that there is a system. And then that's the assumption we have. And so for me, the problem is the actual ideal that we're going after. And I think a lot of what happens in human decision-making is there's a paradox. The more you do think, you have this ethical nature to you, you're actually more at risk. And so what we do is kind of like reboot the whole system to say there's some fundamental illusions no matter where you are in the world. And what happens is when people can actually release the attachment of this goal that they're going after, of being an ethical person, you actually get to be there, you go there better. And it's kind of, it's all more paradox. And I think what happens is the way we teach it many times, it is this, we teach it from how it's comfortable for us to teach. Not much, not connected to necessarily how people make decisions.
No. I also think that most people teach the way they were taught.
Yeah, absolutely.
Most people manage the way they were managed and all of that. I don't know. It seems to me there's a minority of folks who are more reflective about pedagogy and how that was fine in this or that respect, but how better could this be done? I mean, what Mary's done is, for instance, is just tremendously groundbreaking. There's nobody who's doing that, really. So, but that's more the exception than the norm, I think. Yes, Jean?
Hey, Joe. One word that keeps jumping out for me is leadership.
Okay.
We're talking about ethics,
Okay.
and I love the name of the center because it's ethical leadership.
Yeah.
I'm in Mike's class, so business ethics, what we had here at Notre Dame 32 years ago. I don't know that I remember much of it, but I know when I went into the business world, there was a hierarchy. I was in public accounting for a few years, but then GE, and there's a hierarchy, so that you tend to think the leaders are going to lead the way, because that's what leadership means. And then we talk about, well, you've got to run your own career management, reputation management, everybody kind of owns it. But there's still a disconnect between those two, because you're talking 18, 19, 20-year-olds. And that's the reinforcement part, and I love the modeling and the rehearsal, but that's what I think we need more of, is that, it is your own personal leadership. I mean, some of us we're not natural leaders. We grew into leaders, and we try to grow people into leaders. But to this gentleman's point over here, it could be the quiet one you know, that's going to notice what's happening, but do they really see themselves as a leader?
And
So
what does it
I
mean to
think
be a leader?
what we
Yeah.
need to keep focusing on too is the idea that you do lead it. And as uncomfortable as it may be to point something out, to talk about something, you kind of have to push the system that you're in, you know, the organization that you're in.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know, you're going to need that moral courage, you're going to need some support around you.
Sure.
But ultimately, you know, you do lead your life. You're the one who's leaving behind your legacy. What do you want to stand for? What's
Yeah.
success? All of it comes together. But it's breaking down that word leadership into,
Yeah.
there's an organizational structure, but then you yourself have to lead yourself.
One of the things I have done in the EMBA curriculum relevant to that is discuss what's the foundation of the moral authority to lead. Under what conditions do you have it? Under what conditions do you not have it? How could you lose it? All of that. Tom Tyler is a fellow at NYU Law School. He's a doctorate in psychology. And he's done some great work. He wrote a book on why we obey the law, but he's since extended his insights into management. And relevant to compliance, he says, under what conditions will people comply, follow the laws, do the right thing? And he says, fundamentally, if two things are true. One is they view the person asking them to do it as having legitimate authority, as being a leader, as kind of having the moral authority to lead. Second, if they see what they're being asked to do as consistent with their own values and beliefs. So those two things. But the first part of it exactly kind of relevant to what Gene is saying. Adam's just given me the 5-minute sign. So I'm going to go from the process of the ethics to the outcome, kind of what we came out with, some of which we've covered already. Seems like there's more that could be discussed there, though, so I would highlight that. For the programs in the organizational context, I was thinking of a variation of my favorite question when I graduated from law school and was interviewing at law firms. You know, you get to that part of the interview where they turn it around and say, well, do you have any questions for us? So I had a favorite question at that point. And my question was, if the powers that be around here gave you complete authority to make any one change that you wanted to make in this organization, what would that change be? And I got tremendous insights from doing that. So the question I would have for folks who have experienced ethics training in the organizational context, if the powers that be gave you the authority to make any one change in that ethics program, that ethics training program that you wanted to make it more helpful based on your experience, what would that change be? Just as something to ponder. There's a lot that could be said about this revised ethics course, which, by the way, I kind of brainstormed about it in the academic year 06-07. This is how we academics track our lives. And then it was implemented in the fall of 07, been followed since then. The course title is Foundations of Ethical Business Conduct. Foundations of Ethical Business Conduct. And I just have about 5 minutes. So what I would say is that the course is broader and deeper than I think those courses normally are, and really than what we had offered in the past. When I looked at the syllabi of the courses that existed, it had 3 learning objectives. They were ethical awareness, ethical knowledge, and ethical moral judgment. So you have an awareness of an ethical situation, you have knowledge of ethical concepts, theories, and so forth. Can you make an effective moral judgment? And my question myself was, okay, but does it stop there? So I arrived at this tremendous judgment, is that the end of the story? And obviously the answer is no. To Mary's point, you either act on that judgment or not, and there's more than moral reasoning going on, to Craig's point, and there will continue to be more than that going on. So we added 2 more objectives. The first new one was ethical implementation. And that's kind of a combination of moral courage. Do you have the backbone to do what you think is the right thing, even at possible risk of injury or loss, and a kind of, to Mary's point, tactical savvy sort of thing. You know the right thing to say, do, the support to get, political astuteness. Joe Badaracco at Harvard likes to say you need a little bit of Aristotle in terms of the virtues of moral character. You also need a little bit of Machiavelli. You got to be political savvy, because you can be the best intentioned person in the world, but unless you're politically astute about the environment in which you're operating, not much good is going to come of that. So that piece of it is one of the things that we did. The second objective that we added was ethical reflection and idealism. Ethical reflection and idealism. There are 2 different ways to engage in ethics. The primary way in academic courses and also so far as I know in organizational context, is viewing ethics as the periodic exercise of deliberative reason. Periodic exercise, deliberative reason. So you conduct business. Every now and then when you're conducting business, a dilemma, an issue arises. When that happens, you put on your ethics hat. You kind of resolve the dilemma, then you take off the hat and you go back to conducting business. That needs to be done. The best organization in the world, stuff happens. Dilemmas do arise. You need skills at resolving those. But there's this other view of ethics as ongoing critical reflection about what matters most in life and how should I shape my life accordingly, how should I conduct business leadership accordingly. John Peppers, former CEO of Procter & Gamble, wrote a little book called What Really Matters. I just love the title. But that's the question. And that's relevant to Mike's point about success. How do you define success? What really matters? Like for me as an individual, for us as an organization. What really matters? How should we shape our conduct accordingly? So that we sort of do as well. And we start that out, actually. And by the way, I teach some of the sections of the course. My colleague, Professor Murphy, who you'll hear from this afternoon, teaches some of the other sections. We have the same statement of learning objectives, how we achieve them. There's some differences in the particulars there. So in my version of the course, we start out by reading Leo Tolstoy's The Death of Ivan Ilyich. About a 100-page little novella. It's about this fellow in 19th century Russia who's a career lawyer and then judge. He's only focused on climbing the ladder, social standing, being accepted by people in high positions in society. He marries because it's the right time for someone like him to marry and because she comes from the right class and so forth. He gets a terminal illness in his mid-40s, recognizes his wife and kids don't love him, he doesn't love them, his friends aren't his friends, and he's tortured by this question of, did I live the way I should have? Did I live the way I should have? And, clearly comes to the conclusion that he hadn't. So that's just kind of an extensive case study for us on looking at how one individual, what he thought mattered in life, how he shaped his life accordingly, how did that work out for him? And a lot of students see bits of him in their own lives, and it's meant to just stimulate critical reflection for yourselves about, well, what do you think about that? By the way, I contrast that with videos of Randy Pausch, I gave the last lecture at Carnegie Mellon, who also got a terminal illness in his mid-40s, was also married, was also had children, had very different views of life, had a very different experience of death. So it's kind of a way to provide contrast. And a lot of that is just fostering critical awareness. So you could look at it the way this guy does, you could look at it the way that guy does, or something in between. Just think about it. Because a lot of times, Michael Lewis said the motto that guided Wall Street in the 80s was ready, fire, aim. A lot of times we kind of take that approach to achieving success in life. So the idealism is a big piece of that. I would say the course is more practical, and on implementation, we talk about implementation at the personal level, individuals encountering dilemmas, but also at the organizational level. So at the organizational level, if you want to create a values-based organization, to Bill's point, that supports better judgment of your people, what concrete steps can you take? What Jim Collins refers to reinforcement mechanisms, concrete policies and practices that reinforce your professed core values. So TXU is an energy company in Texas, was acquired in the largest private equity buyout in U.S. history in 2006. One of the criteria, and they got support of environmental groups for that buyout. One of the ways they did that was have concrete environmental targets, and the executives would not be paid their bonus unless those targets were hit. It's a reinforcement mechanism. One of the case studies we do is BP. Great statement of ideals, but clearly has fallen short of those. And Texas City, Prudhoe Bay, most recently Deepwater Horizon. So we do what I call an executive hot seat exercise. You're a member of the senior management team there, meeting immediately after Deepwater Horizon. What are your insights into how this happened in the first place? What you need to do so that it doesn't happen in the future? Kind of brainstorm, but concretely. Concrete people, policies, practices, all that sort of a thing. So implementation on both of those levels. And in terms of idealism, we look at moral behavior at personal, organizational, societal levels. At each level, we do two things. First, we ask, what is your goal? What are you striving to achieve at this level? That's how do you define success for a personal level. At the organizational level, we read a wide variety of viewpoints on what is the overriding purpose of a business. And again, it's a question of how high are you aiming when it comes to ethics. How good a person do you want to be? How good an organization do you want to be? Is your goal merely a negative one of avoiding wrongdoing, or are you striving to be exemplary? So on the individual level, for instance, do you want to be a morally good person, you don't cause the problems, you don't lie, cheat, or steal, or do you want to be a morally courageous one who you not only don't create the problems, but you solve them even at some risk to yourself? And everybody's got to decide for themselves where they want to be, but reflect critically about what the choice is. Do it eyes wide open is kind of the goal. It's also a more personal course in that we have students write a statement of personal values and beliefs. So corporations define themselves by a set of core values, guiding principles. I ask students what are the values and beliefs that define you as an individual? A lot of us kind of know that, but have never been asked to articulate it. People find it kind of interesting to do. I have a friend who's a rabbi who in our congregation, they have a practice called writing an ethical will. Not just what are you passing on financially, what are you passing on in terms of values, beliefs, meaning, purpose in life. So it's a great exercise for that. I also have students write their own personal framework for moral decision making. So that's, the personal value statement, where do you stand, morally speaking. The framework is a tool for how do you move from where you stand to the resolution of a particular dilemma. And I give them 10 or so samples of possible frameworks, and they kind of put together their own. And that's a tool that they could actually use when you encounter dilemmas to make sure that you reason through, cover all the bases you should cover. To Craig's point about it's not just all reasoning, and Jessica had mentioned this, the course is also deeper in the sense that we get not just to judgment, what should you do, but what are the drivers of moral behavior. So we use this 4-component model by James Rest, originally came up with it with his then wife, Darsha Narvaez. Rest has since passed away, but Darsha is on our psychology faculty. And the point is that they looked at Kohlberg's work, which focuses on moral development as the development of moral reasoning, moral judgment. And Kohlberg himself said that's not the whole story. So they tried to figure out, well, what else is going on? If you want your people consistently to do the right thing, what else needs to be in place? So they identify these 4 different drivers of moral behavior, and those include moral sensitivity, kind of awareness of the ethical dimension of what you're thinking about, the moral judgment piece, moral motivation, my personal favorite. We all have moral values, we all have non-moral values, things that matter to us that aren't moral values, security, comfort, whatever it is. When your moral values conflict with your non-moral values, are you motivated to prioritize the moral values over the non-moral values? Is that one. And then the 4th component is implementation. Kind of a character thing. So that's used positively, what needs to be in place if our people are going to do the right thing. Used negatively, when somebody does the wrong thing, which of these 4 things was not sufficiently in place. We kind of go deeper that way. We also, with Milgram, look at this kind of, what are the things that eat away at the foundations that could lead you to go morally off the path at the personal level with Milgram. Also at the organizational level. And Jim Collins has come out with this How the Mighty Fall now, 5 stages of decline. So looking at that. All of that assumes that our people are headed for positions of leadership. So it's not just how do you resolve a dilemma, but how do you create a values-based organization? What are the signs that maybe you're going a little bit off the path as an organization? We assume that's kind of where they're headed. In terms of idealism, when I was doing this revision of the course, I came across a statement from a woman who was then president of this student of the MPA program, Master of Public Administration. So people want to do that kind of managerial leadership thing, but in the public context. And she said something that kind of stuck in my craw. And she was asked, why do people go with the MPA program instead of going into business programs? And here is what she said. Students self-select into our programs rather than into business schools, in part because of values, because they already know they want to make a difference, to do work that is socially meaningful and contributes to our communities. I'm here because I believe that you can do that, make a tremendous positive difference as a business person, and I don't think that we should cede the ground. So part of ethics is how do you resolve particular dilemmas and so forth, but part of it also, I think, is affirming the good values, all your great people, because the vast majority of the people, who are in our classrooms and your fork are really great people. And the question is, how do you affirm their better values and better judgments and help them see how the work that you're asking them to do is a tremendously positive thing? There was some fellows from the Gallup organization in 2006 wrote a book called 12, the number 12, The Elements of Great Managing. And it was based on more than 10 million interviews with employees on what makes for employee engagement. Rod Wagner and James Harder were the authors of that. And the 8th of the 12 elements is connection with a sense of mission in a company. What they point out is, consistently with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, when people's basic needs for food, clothing, housing, et cetera, aren't met, their focus is going to be on meeting those. But once those basic needs are securely met, people yearn for something more, a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose. They want to feel they're making a positive difference. I love that series of ads Boeing puts out on We Know Why We're Here. And I think in any organization, people ought to have a ready answer to that. Why is it important that you're doing the work that you're doing? Who benefits in what way from the product or service that you are providing? If I can't answer that question, how motivated can I be? And people will be motivated to the extent they feel they're making a positive difference in offering what you offer, the way you offer it, and being who you are. So the students have responded quite positively to that. We're heartened by that. And your comments were great, so we'll take those to heart, especially that one. So thanks very, very much for your time and attention, and a long-delayed lunch now awaits you. Thanks.
Joe has asked for 2 minutes to make a kind of photos so, Joe, you're up.
Okay. Just a couple of points I wanted to highlight that I neglected to add the first time. One of the things we speak about is kind of this question of what is your voice around ethics? So when you communicate about ethics with your people, what tone do you take? What do you emphasize? We look at 2 different CEO cover letters to codes of conduct, one of which takes this kind of, as you know, we've been involved in major litigation recently. We'd rather not be, therefore we've adopted this code of conduct. And the other one is we've adopted this, inherited this proud tradition, and we want to carry that on. So one way to talk about the teaching of ethics here is to say that it emphasizes the positive side of ethics. So I think the dominant emphasis in ethics in academic settings and also corporate ones is on the negative side. Not ethics is a bad thing, but ethics with the goal of avoidance, the avoidance of wrongdoing. And the positive side, you want to achieve that as a minimum threshold, but then go beyond that to achieve excellence in terms of moral behavior, act in a way that your company can be sort of proud of it. So, and that's where the kind of affirming the good thing piece comes in. The other part of that is not just what you teach, but the sort of the how you teach it. And I think we moved less lecture and more discussion, and tried to be more engaging. So, and there are 2 comments that sort of motivated me in that. One was from a colleague who mentioned that in his department they had adopted this new approach to teaching. And he said the difference is that under the old approach, the goal was to have the faculty member leaving the classroom saying, didn't I do a great job today? Under the new approach, the goal is to have the students leaving the classroom saying, didn't we do a great job today? So the second thing that guided me in that was Jim Collins, when he wrote Good to Great, did a version of Good to Great for the nonprofit sector. And in the introduction to that monograph, he told the story about getting his doctorate at Harvard. He went to teach at Stanford for a year, went back after the first year to talk to his mentor at Harvard, and asked, how can I elevate my teaching? And the mentor said, Jim, you've worked really hard for years to be interesting. Now you need to work equally hard to be interested. That seems to be the interested in what the people in front of you are thinking, feeling, dreaming, fearing, all of that. Without that, you won't get much. So just wanted to highlight that. So it's kind of, and in a sense, Mary spoke about the sort of how of ethics. With the idealism, I think what we try to get at is in addition to the how, the why. Why? What's the overall goal, purpose? You as an individual, we as an organization are striving to achieve. Why is this important? That's relevant for individuals. Also in terms of compliance, there are different levels of compliance. It's kind of, an extrinsically driven compliance, need to comply to avoid punishment and so forth. It's also intrinsically driven. So to the Tyler point, do you follow the laws and regulations because you'll be penalized for not doing it, or because you see them as making sense? You kind of appreciate there's a certain value the rules, laws, regulations are trying to protect, and you're committed to that value. So with bribery, for instance, as a Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, okay, you can teach that by here are the provisions and here's when you're following it, here's when you're not. Or you can ask the question, well, why is there that law in the first place? And ideally, the market economy doesn't work well if decisions are made not on the basis of price and quality, but on the basis of who is and who isn't paying a bribe, as a for instance. So I think you can get, I think most organizations, in my experience, are not getting what they could out of their attorneys. They're asking attorneys just to talk about the what of the law and not so much the why of the law. kind of what is the meaning there. I think we could get more use out of us that way. Thanks very much. Have a great afternoon. I have to go teach a spirituality class, but all the best. Thank you. Thanks, Ed.